Start in a moment. And we're starting. My name is Jim Eskin. On behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our nonprofit empowerment webinar series. And we're going to address this afternoon the topic of leadership. Do we know who this is? This is someone who is affectionately nicknamed by actually the Soviet press, the Iron Lady. And this is Margaret Thatcher. And she was the first female prime minister of the United Kingdom. She served from 1979 to 1990. And not only was she the first woman to serve as prime minister, she was the longest serving prime minister that England's ever had. And I love this quote she had. She said, being a leader is like being a lady. If you have to remind people you are, you aren't. And leadership is so essential in the nonprofit and sector. It's always been essential. And I think right now, as we face an unprecedented period of crisis, risk, and uncertainty, leadership has never been more essential. And I like to think when it comes to what commodities does a nonprofit need to achieve its greatest potential, I'll put leadership right at the top of the list. I know people might want to say money, they might want to say computers, they might want to say buildings, they might even want to see the size of the staff. But I think you cannot seize your maximum potential without the right leadership. And that's why we're thrilled to have as our subject matter expert in today's webinar, Marc A. Pitman, who is in Greenville, South Carolina. He's going to get a fuller introduction in just a few minutes. Marc, hello. And by the way, how is the Pitman family doing?
We are well and all together. Our son came home from college and we're practicing. We're just enjoying the joy that's in the house now.
Well, that's great. Now, by the way, Marc is given, he's pretty good at this. He's given at least 1,000 talks. And I said, I'm going to rush a question and then we're going to get to a fuller Q&A in about 7 minutes. But Marc, you've given 1,000 talks. My question is, can you remember the first one? And can you remember the number 1,000? And during those talks, those 1,000 talks, how many times did you have a bow tie on? And how many times were you without bow tie?
Wow. Well, I remember talks like in Catholic school reciting the Psalm 23 or doing parliamentary debate in high school. But one time somebody asked me how a seminar went and I said, don't ask me, I could have fun talking to a wall. And my mom was in the room and she said, you did. When you were in a crib, you used to talk to the cowboys on the wallpaper. So apparently my first talk was talking to cowboys on the wallpaper. They were a static audience and that was good. My bow tie started about 3 years old, but didn't become part of it was around the time when I started, became part of the formal uniform when I was fundraising actually, because I could say I'm the guy with the glasses, beard, and a bow tie. And that for most places there I was fundraising, that limited the group.
Yeah, well, thank you. And we're going to give you a little fuller introduction. Marc, we have every webinar, we like to say when it comes to talk about who should be ranked essential, right at the top of the list is the nonprofit community. And we've introduced this graphic and slogan, Nonprofit Strong, and we begin each webinar by asking our attendees to type in those words, Nonprofit Strong. Please type it in, Nonprofit Strong. And now a surprise question for our expert. What are we, Marc?
We are muted. No, we are Nonprofit Strong. I almost started answering, but my volume wasn't up.
Okay. I wanted to give you just a little background. I met Marc when I was in my higher education advancement career, and I had 25 wonderful years at 3 institutions of higher learning in the San Antonio area. And during those 25 years, I had the privilege of working with a wide range of business and community leaders who, this won't surprise Mark, who are absolutely fearless in everything they faced in their lives, except what? Asking for a gift for their favorite cause. And I think when you talk about it, fear is based on fear of the unknown. And so in June of 2018, my wife and Andrea and I launched Eskin Fundraising Training. And our job is to demystify the art and science of fundraising and to replace fear with comfort and confidence. We like to have everybody in our database. If you're not receiving our free newsletter, you'll be receiving the slides and the recording of this session, and you'll be able to click there. Or if you want to add a friend or a colleague, we'd love to have you join us, because in addition to receiving our monthly e-newsletter, this is how you're invited to the webinars, which are free of charge. I've written a book last year. I'm a little behind Mark. He's written a couple of books, and they've been translated into several languages. So we're going to talk about his newest book towards the end of the show. But also, I want to thank him. He very generously reviewed my book, and that made my wife and Andrea and I had an extra glass of wine that night. That was a wonderful review. Thank you. This is our webinar series for the spring. I've just been working on the lineup for the summer, and I'm very excited. Mark, we're going to be doing these. Your brand's the bow tie. My brand is Wednesday afternoons, 4 to 5 p.m. We like to embrace the learning of everything. We think Mark and I know something, but we like to think that we're a learning community. When we do live workshops, when we do webinars, that also there is much wisdom in our audience, because our audience is made up of nonprofit CEOs, executive directors, board chairs, board members, directors of development, volunteers, donors, and we like to think between everybody in the room, live or digitally, we can answer almost any question. I like to borrow a line from my good friend and colleague, Marc Leroy in upstate New York, who reminds us, and Mark well knows, that, you know, in fundraising, money is not the end. It's just the means to the end. And it is, by the way, it's both the gifts of time and money that allow us to make the world better for others. When we talk about the art and science of fundraising, we like to break it into 4 distinct stages. The first one is identifying who we're going to ask for support of time and money. Number 2 is the all-important phase of cultivation, in which we forge a personal and emotional bonding between the donor prospect and the mission of our organization. The third one is more obvious. It's solicitation. It's the who, what, when, where, how much, and for what we ask for. And finally, we close the loop with stewardship, in which we thank and acknowledge the gifts, because after we've asked Mark for a nice gift this year, we're going to go back next year and ask him to give again and consider an increase. So now we have a couple of polls. We'd like you to type in A, B, C, or D. We're looking for your guidance on what topics you want covered in future webinars. So you either type in A for discovery, B for cultivation, C for solicitation, or D for stewardship. By the way, Marc Pitman is an expert on all 4 of those. John, are we getting some responses?
Yes, we are. Leading the way is D, stewardship.
Interesting. That's interesting.
Followed by C, solicitation, and then A and B are tied.
That's interesting. I think it's a sophisticated audience. I'm having trouble moving the slides. Hold on, folks. I'm gonna go out and go back in. John, as a backup, did we send you a slide set?
I don't think so, but
Okay, look here. I really, you're giving 1,000 talks. We've had typical difficulties, not this one.
I think the craziest one was doing fundraising training during a lockdown.
Yeah. Hey, John, how can I want to escape and get back in. Do I have to
you stop screen share.
stop share? Okay.
There you go.
And then, oh, how do I, okay, minimize this and, okay, escape. We're locked up. We're having a little problem here. Folks, we just need about 2 minutes and someone drink or take a glass of wine.
There's wine?
John, any, look for, okay, Mark, let me tell you what, let's move to your questions, okay?
Cool. I got it, yeah.
And John Largent, if you could look, Andrea sent you some slides this afternoon, I think. Okay, so if you could look in your inbox. Let's start. And this, I think Mark actually planned this. This gets your questions off to a quicker start. What distinguishes effective leadership during a crisis as opposed to during non-crisis times?
Oh, wow. So part of it, leadership is essential anyway for running nonprofits in particular. But during a crisis, what we're seeing now, and I've been fundraising and working with nonprofits since through the dot-com burst, 9/11, housing crash, different crises. I remember pastoring a church and riding in on the Sunday and hearing a huge typhoon had hit parts of the Pacific. So we've seen all sorts of different things. This is unique because it's all of it together. And what we're finding is that a lot of leadership is focused, it has to focus on what are the essentials. What are we really good at? I have a podcast called the Conquered Leaders Podcast that I just interviewed somebody for. And one of the things she did was they do all these social services for families. They do food and social education and help families socialize with their kids and help their kids learn to cooperate with each other. During this, she realized there are a lot of good people doing food. And so she pared down her services to really try to focus on how do we do social things with kids when they're stuck at home. And so I think that really being able to figure out what's the mission creep and what's our focus, our essential is huge. And another part, Jim, that's really important that many leaders forget is to remind their followers, their staff, the people they serve, what isn't changing. We all need to remember what's staying the same. In a time of uncertainty, we have to have that kind of gravitas and that feeling of confidence that it's going to be, not that it's going to be okay. You don't want to give false promises. And part of what's hard for leaders to do in a time like this is to say, I don't have the answers because we haven't been this way before. But being able to remind them what is staying the same, even if that means reduction of staff or reduction of services or changing of income structures, that we're still here about our mission and we're still here to do what we're called to do and what we were created to do. That's definitely some of the things that are just distinguishing effective leadership in a crisis.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to go to the control room for a second. John, are we okay? I'm seeing a slide now and moving.
Yeah, I put the slide up on my end.
No, but I have it. Okay. And by the way, Mark, I cheated you with an introduction. Can I minimize that? And by the way, John, are we okay as far as Mark and I on the screen?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Mark, I really cut short your introduction. Can I simplify it to this? You are a genuine mensch. He is a wise and good man that's been doing good for others for a long time, and he has inspired a whole lot of us. in the fundraising field to aim and reach higher. So thank you for the role you played as a shining example of a fundraising mentor, instructor, everything that's right about our profession, you hold near and dear. So I'm going to reduce your introduction to that.
I'll
and
take
start.
it. Wow, that was great.
Good. Okay, you got it. And we saved some time too. Marc, this is a question that means a lot to me, maybe to some of the audience. How can staff members, other than the people at the top, the CEO, the ED, or the board chair, step up and provide leadership to their nonprofit during this crisis?
That's so good because leadership isn't, first of all, I firmly believe leadership isn't just a job title. There are some people that it's your ability to impact a certain area around you. And so whether you're a board member or a staff member, not necessarily the one with the title, the helping keep focus on what the core things are is really important. I don't know if you've heard stories. I don't know if it was Sarah Plain and Tall. Maybe it was Sarah Plain and Tall, harkening back to Maine. They're in Minnesota or one of the Midwestern states where they have really big blizzards. They used to have to tie a rope from the barn to the home so that when they went out and fed the horses and the livestock, they could find their way back. And what board members in particular can help do is help the CEO know, or the executive director know, this is our core, this is what we're doing, and just kind of bring them back, because being a nonprofit CEO is incredibly hard. You're being drawn and quartered on a daily basis. And so having people that can, so here it is. So businesses, you have, you're the boss and you have your staff and you service customers. And if you please the customers, they provide the revenue for you to do it. It becomes this easy circle. But for a nonprofit CEO, you're not the boss, the board is. And oftentimes they think individually they are, which they're not. It's the board as a group. And you have a staff that is smarter than you, because that's the way you should hire, and they expect you to have the answers.
Exactly.
And then you have the people that you benefit, but no matter how well you serve them, they're not going to be able to. The whole fact that you're a nonprofit means you need donors also. So you're getting drawn and quartered. I usually have my feet out. The Zoom screen's a little smaller, but you're getting drawn and quartered on a regular basis. And so if there are ways that you can have compassion for your leader, for your CEO in a crisis, that's a huge part that will help you navigate through this. One of the ways to do that, it's interesting, but stories come up, but when I was pastoring a church, I was a church planner that had a full-time job at the local hospital as a chief fundraising officer to pay for my pastoring habit. The people would come to me with issues with the church. Oh, there's this problem. And they'd just leave it there. And so I finally started telling them, my cat will sometimes leave a dead rat or rodent on the doorstep. And I think she thinks she's helping me eat. I think she's maybe thinking I'm malnourished, so she's taking care of me. But she's just making more of a mess. So instead of just coming and sharing a problem, could you share the problem? And since you've actually been gifted enough to see the problem, maybe you could give 2 or 3 different ways that we could solve that problem. And so I was trying to train them, and I've done this with staff I've worked with too, to try to train them to acknowledge the fact that they're gifted to see the problem, but also come with some ideas of solutions. And of course, as a good leader, then you delegate the responsibility. That's a great idea. Why don't you go and try this one over here that you suggested? Your idea is really good. But that can be really helpful if you're not in the titled role of leader as you're moving through this, for sure.
Yeah. It reminds me, I had a boss early on in my career. I like remembering stuff. If it's not worth knowing, I want to know it. I love trivia. But he said, if you're smart enough to hire people smarter than you, you're smarter than people think.
It's good. It's so weird because when you're going into leadership, it's having the answers to the questions that gets you promoted.
Yeah.
But then when you're the leader, that becomes micromanaging when you have all the answers. Yeah. But you've been all the way through your career, you've been rewarded for having the answers. And so it's having to retool yourself to be able to ask the right questions.
And don't you find as we get gray too fast, we begin to know more, we realize how more there is to find out and discover.
Hopefully. I think the strongest leaders are the ones that are really good at following somebody
Yeah.
else or other things. Lifelong learners. It's not the ones that have decided they figured it all out and, well, we tried that before. That whole internet thing is just a fad. It's not going to work. You have to be adaptable and able to grow too.
Yeah. Well, this one I think will have a lot of relevance for our audience. God bless it. I've been at various levels of nonprofit organizations, and I've been at public and private institutions. How can nonprofits and organizations expedite the decision-making process, since it's so important now to pivot and move quickly?
It's hard to encapsulate in one thing, but John, if you could pull up the slide that I have for this one, because I think a picture could help.
Is this the three stances?
The three stances, yeah.
I think, John, is that, because I'm seeing it on my screen. I'm sorry, folks, we're having a little sweat here.
So part of the way, there we go, great. And this is something that I have seen helpful in this particular pandemic. Karen Horney was a German psychoanalyst who noticed that there are a lot of similarities in the way people respond to things. First, she thought there were about 10, I think, and then she narrowed it down to 3. And I think this can really help expedite decision-making in a crisis. There are the 3 instinctual stances she noticed were that some people were really aggressive and their default is to take action. Okay, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to overcome this? Some people are more dependent, which means they're scanning socially around them. What do people need? What are the systems that are here? The answer must be in the people around me. The aggressives are thinking the answer hasn't been created yet, so let's create it. And then there are withdrawing people that kind of lean back, and these are often CEOs that get maligned because they close their door, so they seem aloof. But they actually, they bring to the table the ability to think through things and process data. So in a stressful time, you've got people that are trying to take action and it just makes sense to them to take action. You've got people that look at those people and think, you're nuts. Why are you taking action? We need to kind of get the lay of the land and find out where everybody's at. And you've got this third group of people saying, whoa, we need to just take a breather here. And so knowing that those 3 different tendencies exist can help you, first of all, to know what your own tendency is and why you're irritated with the people around you, but also to know that we need all 3 to get through a pandemic. And that can help with the decision-making. When you need to make a decision quickly, you can get the aggressive person, maybe channel them into that way, because they will take action typically fearlessly. If you're working for a more withdrawn CEO, you should be thankful, because they're probably amassing the data that's needed to navigate PPP and donations and all the different other things that are going on. But you could go to them and say, here's a plan. Here's a 3-bullet plan that I have. And I'd just like your permission to go and pursue this. These are the experts I've been listening to. Especially if they're dependent, you could say, I'm listening to experts and I'm listening to our donors want to do something, or I'm listening to our community want to respond this way. And I think the right decision for us is to move forward. Another thing that's very important, though, is for boards of directors to be able to give the CEO space to make mistakes. Because Could you repeat
that?
Yeah, definitely. We want to give we as board of directors, we need to give the CEO room to make mistakes. The riskiest thing in
I hope our board members are listening here.
Yeah. The riskiest thing in nonprofits right now is to not take risks. We need to be experimenting. We need to be trying, just like the restaurant that's closed and is now experimenting with takeout and trying other ways to serve people. We as nonprofits need to do that within, not mission creep, but we haven't, like I said before, we haven't been this way before. And the last thing we need our CEO to be doing is worrying that their job is on the line because they may make a risky decision. They worry that already in the good times. And in the bad times, we need to help them, let them know we have their back and that we're talking with them. And so some board chairs are going to have to step up and be talking a little bit more regularly with their CEO, or encouraging the CEOs to connect with other CEOs so that they can have a safe place to just kind of verbally process if they need to.
Very good. Marc, what roles can major donors ask to play during this crisis other than giving more money?
Well, I wouldn't say there's an other than.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yes, I would say including. Okay.
Including is great. Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Starting
giving.
with. How about starting with?
So everybody that's here, if you work in a nonprofit, I think you should be on the board of a nonprofit because you need to understand how your organizational structure works and what your board members, wonderful people that have full lives, are working through. If you're also in a nonprofit, I think you should be donating to a nonprofit to understand what it's like to be a donor and have that experience. As major donors need to be reminded that now more than ever their gifts are making a difference, not because the organization needs to pay the bills, but because they're having an impact on something that they value. That's what they want to do. And so the next thing to do is, if you have the term major donors is awful because it's insider speak. Everybody has inestimable worth, every human being. We need to try to figure out how to moderate our time so that we're have integrity and good stewardship. And so we call major donors, some people major donors. Those people tend to get a little bit higher touch and more personalized attention. And so you should know what their expertise is, what their roles are, if there are HR lawyers or if there are bankers or financiers or entrepreneurs, and figure out what your needs are in your nonprofit, and then be able to go individually to those major donors and first and foremost say, hey, look, I know you get paid to do this. So I'm not trying to pick your brain. I can't stand that term. I just want to pick your brain. Well, I'd like to leave some of it for myself too. So it's just saying, but we have this HR issue here. We're trying to figure out layoff or furlough or PPP. Would you be open to discussing this? And that can lead to a much greater relationship later, because as you know, donors want to know that they're not just an ATM, that you see who they are. Yeah. So I think that's plugging into their expertise and their brilliance is really a real opening here. And if you don't know what that is with your major donors, you've probably been doing fundraising wrong, because there should be a group of people that you've been building that relationship with over the years.
Hey, Mark, even before COVID-19, it was estimated that half of nonprofits had only 1 month of operating reserves and less than 6 months of cash to keep them in operation. What are the first steps such nonprofits should be taking?
And it's not much better in the business world either. My friend Sherry Koshi was talking about that a few weeks ago. I think the first steps are, I think you have to be honest about viability. And I'm not sure how vulnerable to be with this, but there are going to, I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't probably tell you I was going to say this, but there are going to be nonprofits that don't make it through this.
No, okay.
We are seeing donors, our clients are seeing 3 and 4 times their fundraising, their revenue, 300% and 400% revenue over the previous year in April and May. But there's going to be a trough, as we know from other crises. There's going to be a hard slog coming up, and so being able to have that honest, frank conversation with the right people, and also letting staff know if there's an issue. Like, I know my bookkeeper, I don't know about you, but my bookkeeper is keeping, every week sends me my run rate, how much cash reserves I have if I just keep all my expenses where they are, or where they've been on average. So having those honest conversations and having the guts to, and the board really needs to be, this is also maybe contrarian, but I really believe the board needs to be mission focused on what are we here to accomplish, not organization focused, focusing on keeping the organization alive. I think some really interesting collaborations can happen, and some other ways of serving the community and whatever the fight is that we're trying to fight could happen if we have that. Now, those are the depressing things. I think one of the things that could be really happening if you're in a money crunch is it could motivate you to finally get out and ask. And hopefully you can get out and ask and get over let the fear motivate you, but not control you. So fear can be an incredible motivator, but it's a very bad asking tool, because people know that we've moved past. In the early part of March, people would give to a nonprofit for whatever reason. No, and now they'll give if you're in crisis and trying to pay the bills, but they probably won't give again, because none of us want to invest in something that's not well managed and well led. So, but if you have a payroll you have to meet, then it may get you off the dime to actually make the call, and you have to try to get yourself in an emotional space of talking with the donor as a rational human being to another rational human being. And I think the rest of it is the staff and all can do some really deep organizational soul searching and really find out what are our values. Why are we here, and try to create a space for adjusting how we work and adjusting how other things happen. It's not going to be comfortable. I don't have a sugar, a happy silver bullet.
Marc, I think one of the reasons you're so respected, you are a truth teller. And I know when I was on the other side, the nonprofit, my number one priority in hiring a consultant was someone who was there, who was going to tell us the truth, not just tell us what will get you rehired. Hopefully the truth and get you rehired would be the same. But the commodity I respected the most in consultants was truth telling.
That's why I liked coaching. I gravitated to coaching for that reason too, because I found the coaches were more invested in me and my growth there are great consultants out there, but the consultants I had in much of my career were trying to pretend that the internet didn't exist and I couldn't Google the information or Yahoo the information at the time. So thank you. I appreciate that. I received it. Thanks.
Marc, we can always learn from the past. So what leadership lessons come from crises that the nonprofit sector has faced in the past?
This is really good. Part of it is the leaders that I just was talking to one of my colleagues. He said that the leaders that hibernate with the bears in the crisis are the ones that don't come out of it well. So we've seen in past recessions and other crises that the leaders, it doesn't have to be an active, upfront, charismatic leader. It could be, there's all sorts of different leadership styles. But the ones that keep communicating with their donors and keep communicating with their staff and their community, keep showing their relevance as they're going through this, are the ones that come out stronger. In the fundraising world, the people that took a long time in asking or pulled back from asking because a board member said this isn't the right time, which is just craziness. It's understandable.
Could you repeat that?
So board members that say this isn't the right time to be asking is just crazy.
Or insanity.
That's like you going into your heart surgeon as you're getting wheeled into a heart surgery because you're having a heart attack, saying, "What kind of scalpel are you using?" Because I'm not sure you're using the right scalpel. They know their stuff, and as a nonprofit staff, you should know fundraising, whether you're a CEO or a fundraiser, because that's the revenue model.
I love that analogy, by the way. I love that analogy.
It's so frustrating. And I think what's really frustrating is it sounds reasonable because we all will get into the sector because we want to help. But, and that's going to happen even more so coming up. It's going to be really tested because we know from the past that there's usually a spike in giving and then a trough. And during that trough, you need to keep communicating with people. And I'm only talking about giving because that's the lifeblood of getting the mission done. So during that trough, you have to communicate more, even though there's a little bit less results than you would have seen before. But when it gets back up, you'll be much faster to improve. I'm so excited about the leaders.
Next show. Hey, you'll come back, won't you?
I could. Yeah, that'd be great.
You could. You will. Okay, you heard it, folks. Hey, Marc, what are some of the positive indicators we've seen in the nonprofit sector during this crisis?
We get the front row seat to human generosity. We get to see the best in people. We get to see whether it's their cash or their giving, they're supporting and wanting to do something. And so I think that's really positive. You have to take opinion polls with a grain of salt because we say that we'll do things that we don't actually do. But having said that, Fidelity just came out with a poll from donors saying that something like 70% of them were going to be giving the same or more.
3 out of 4. Yeah.
That was done in March. So that was still the early part of the stay-at-home orders and before a lot of unemployment. But there's a natural inclination hardwired in human beings to help. And so I think that's really good. And one of my big things is, you already addressed it, is that if you're in a nonprofit, you are essential.
Yeah.
I was so annoyed at the beginning of this crisis where people were saying, well, we're not essential, so we're backing off.
And I want to say you're more essential than ever.
Absolutely. We have seen that the arts are helping people stay sane when they're stuck at home.
That's not easy, by the way.
And it's not. No, there's a lot of people that got married, but didn't get married to spend like life
Yeah.
together. They just spent their life together as they went off to work and came
AIDS, till
back.
death do we part didn't include to
But
quarantine, did it?
yeah, exactly. It's like, I like you, but I'm not sure I like you that
Yeah.
much. So any nonprofit, even if it's not being able to be used now, I'm talking to some people that have their whole nonprofits about convening. And you're essential because the minute that you get back into being able to convene, you want to be there and be up and ready to take care of whatever it is, if it's preserving history or conserving land or serving people or serving pets and animals. I work with a clinic, an animal shelter that does surgeries that can't do them right now, but they're still actively receiving donations and talking to people because of that. So there are people, I think there are so many positive indicators in a really dark time because we get to see people's goodness and the real joy that people have.
I think you were in the audience a couple of weeks ago. We had Melissa Brown on talking from
Yes.
economic perspective, and she pointed right now philanthropy is responding in a stronger way than it did during the recession of 2008. Actually, the primary indicators are better than they were in 2008.
Well, and this also, going through a time like this stinks in the best ways. I mean, there's a lot of better words that would be used, but we'll be so much stronger when we come out of it as nonprofits and as communities. And so I think that's a positive indicator too, that as we navigate this well, we're going to be able to be far more effective in whatever our mission is going forward too.
Before we take questions from the audience, and I love your pace, but you have a new book coming out, I believe in March, and I love the title of it. It's called The Surprising Gift of Doubt.
Yes.
And I want to know, what is this book about?
In a nutshell, this is all 15 years of leadership coaching that I've been doing with people since 2003. 17 years. Man, those years go quickly. 17 years of leadership coaching finally in book form to help leaders. Because I think leaders get to a point in all of their journeys, all of our journeys, where we just start losing confidence in ourselves because the people we follow, they seem to be doing things well, and it's not going as easily for us. And the books that we read and the podcasts and all don't fix the way they're supposed to. They don't fix us or our organization. And so we kind of get to this point of thinking, are we just broken? And we might be, and there's therapy and there's other things that are good for that. But a lot of that, there's a gift in that doubt that will move us into this introspection. And so the book talks about 3 major areas for tools for introspection, both with your organization and your person, to figure out how you operate and why some of the things, maybe parts of it are good, but not all of it is good. And you can have a cohesive answer as you go
I
forward.
look forward to it. And by the way,
confidence.
It's up on my screen, John. Marc had a slide that shows he has 2 terrific downloads available for the Concord Leadership Group that I recommend everybody, and they're free. Okay, and it's funny.
It's earlier than that,
technology, though. I can see it on my screen.
This is an old deck. Okay, so I will put them into the chat. There's if you want to know more, and Ann, I'll get to your question too. If you want to know more about leadership, we did commissioned a study with Adrian Sargent, and we talked about transactional servant leadership, transactional leadership, transformational leadership, and charismatic leadership, and looked at what their impact was on fundraising. So if your leadership style is actually helping the fundraising of your nonprofit. So that's called the Wake Up Call, and I'll put that in there. And the other one is a daily focus sheet. It can be really hard when our brains are tired, we're not thinking clearly. Getting through some days can be a real hard slog. Some hours can be hard slogs. So there's a simple daily focus sheet that helps you know what your priorities are, and at least at the end of the day, you can figure out, like, I did at least this. Or as one of my clients found out, it's a 2-day sheet for him. He puts way too much on, and so it's the next couple of days. But it's been helping bring clarity to people.
That's great. Process. Right on. Hey, John Largent, and I see the slides on my screen, but I don't think the folks are. We're going to go to Q&A, but can you advance to the slide, John, that says knowing head and honest heart? And John, do we have, Marc, will you take some questions from the audience?
I'd be honored to, and I see a really great one in there that I wish I could have some more backstory with from Ann, who says, how do you deal with people in the nonprofit who have a different opinion on what the mission is?
I love
Yeah,
that question.
it's a great question. I was at one of my kids' orchestra practices a few years ago, and I realized it was like that's the way a nonprofit should be run. There was a conductor who everybody was looking at their own sheet of music, playing their own instrument, but it was all beautiful and in harmony. Oftentimes, when we don't have a good strategic plan, we don't have any in writing. Everybody has a strategic plan for or hopes or goals for the organization in their head. And so board meetings become competing ideas of what's right. And so I think it's really important. This isn't the time to be doing a strategic plan, but getting some core values and getting some agreement on that. Unfortunately, it also depends on who the person that doesn't agree is. I had a client whose incoming board chair didn't know why the nonprofit existed. He thought it was just a jobs program for the staff.
Right.
That's not really motivating.
No.
So there are ways that you might be able to. So what we did with her, she had 6 months to go before he became board chair. And I said, what do you hope that he'll know by the time he's board chair? And she listed out a bunch of things, and we put it on her calendar in seemingly random ways to introduce him to things like The Overhead Myth by Dan Pallotta and a video
Yeah.
of this or a
Yeah.
report of that. And hey, I just happened to find this. And so we did an informal curriculum for them. But I'd love to know more. If you're willing to give more in the chat, I'd consider answering deeper.
Okay, great. Do we have some other questions? If not, I might throw one at, take another chance to throw one at Marc. John, and you have control of the slide, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I don't know, Marc, I'm not up to 1,000 talks yet. So let's talk about, one thing we know about this business, it's communicate. What's your advice to a nonprofit on communicating when, let's face it, we all don't know a lot more than what we do know?
Well, I think part of it is, I may sound like a broken record, but I really think knowing your values are important as an organization and having a clue of what your donors' values are. And the easiest way to find that out, or your beneficiaries' values, your board values, is to just ask them. What got you started giving to this in the first place? Because it's in times like this where we're able to connect on that. And I think being really human is really important in our communicating.
Hey, dig a little deeper on that one.
Yeah, so it's not like you're going to call. I'm not going to call you up. Hey, Jim, I'm calling from XYZ nonprofit. We're doing great things and we need your support. It is very reasonable at this time to say, hey, Jim, I'm calling from XYZ nonprofit. How are you doing?
Yeah.
I remember talking to one of my board chairs who wasn't able to make a pledge or wasn't able to make a gift to a particular campaign because of the 2008 crisis. He said, Marc, I'm just trying to keep my employees employed. I'm just trying to pay my paychecks right now. And I went back to him very sincerely and said, thank you so much. It's because employers like you exist that we have a community that we can serve. So thank you so much for taking care of your employees. He was blown away. He'd never had a nonprofit leader tell him that.
Yeah, I remember when I was in a private university, and one of our largest donors, here in Texas, of course, is tied to the energy industry. And he was one of our most generous donors and was, I think, at a 5-year pledge at, I think it was $100,000 a year. And he was embarrassed, because of the decline. He didn't have to say anything. I was so proud. We went with our university president to see him, and she told him, I won't use his name, don't worry about it. You've been there for us. We know you'll be there when you're able. And sure enough, the energy industry turned around. He doubled a $500,000 gift to $1 million. So we got time maybe for another question.
So one of the things too, and I just am, because you led with fundraising, I want to just kind of go there. If somebody can't give at this time or doesn't feel they can, because there's psychic poverty and there's real poverty. The psychic poverty is when your stock portfolio or donor stock portfolio goes down, so they feel like they have less, even if they have, objectively plenty to still generate to give. Your mettle as a leader can be tested as how you handle a no. If you're able to be, just like you said, really genuine and compassionate or empathetic in that moment, you will have a friend for life that will be, and it'll pay off in multiple ways, not just financial, over the time that you're there and for your nonprofit. So just remember, we're in the long game here as much as possible.
Hey, Mark, I love that you brought that up. I think people might find this kind of contrarian, but I always define a very strong donor relationship is you can ask and hear the word no, but the relationship continues not only to go on to grow. And that's what I define a real relationship, because it shows the commitment of the nonprofit and also the donor prospect that a no
Absolutely. And it
run
blows
away.
donors away because they don't expect it. They're so
Yeah.
used to being forgotten. And we're so hurt with the perceived rejection
Right.
that we don't want to bug them again. But you and I know that most donors that even say, take me off your list, 18 months later are wondering why they don't hear from us anymore. And then it becomes that moral dilemma of saying, well, remember how ticked off you were 18 months ago because of this decision? Oh, right, never mind. You don't want to remind them of what angered them. We have a good question in here now. Is that perhaps now is not the time for strategy, but for many nonprofits, so many assumptions are no longer valid, and we will not go back to normal. What should a leader do? And this is where, again, the values, and I don't mean to be a one-trick pony because I'm not, but values, knowing what it is that you stand for, and if you had a manifesto, this is what we stand for, this is what we stand against, can help you navigate as you're going through, because you're not going to be able to do what you did last year. I'm telling people that are trying to plan their revenue to look back at the 2007, 2008, 2009, and 2010 tax returns, see what your donations hit was then, and try to use that as some sort of litmus test now. You have to budget really conservatively because you don't know, but you don't, one of the worst things you can do as a leader is cut your fundraising staff or marketing staff.
Repeat that, because I'm about final words. Repeat that.
Okay, so one of the things you don't want to do at this time is cut your fundraising and marketing staff, because people need to know you're relevant and you're still out there. If you focus only on programs, that would be like trying to go on a cross-country trip and saying, we're going to go on a cross-country trip, but we're not going to put any gas in the car. You're going to run out at some point, and you're going to have to close.
Huge returns on investing in fundraising. Mark, I'm going to
And you can get some of the best fundraisers right now. There are some that are on the market, and they're cheaper.
Right. And I'd like to take the last 14 minutes we have here to kind of summarize, which is difficult. But first of all, Marc's been talking about what it takes to lead a nonprofit. I think really it's the essence of what it takes to be an effective fundraiser, and that is embracing those Jeffersonian virtues of a knowing head and an honest heart. And, I'm advancing, and John, can you advance? I think this has always been true, but never had more profound meaning right now. This is a line that President Clinton used in his inaugural, and it is so true. If we're going to rise up to this challenge, and let's face it, folks, we have to dig ourselves out of a deep hole. We don't have American to waste. And that means we don't have a nonprofit to waste. We don't have a nonprofit employee or board member or volunteer to waste. You all have an important role. And John, can you move to the next slide? This is picking up. This is going to be a time of making difficult choices and decisions, because we are going to be challenged by resources. As we talked about, the nonprofit sector, even before COVID, had resource challenges. And now more than ever, as Marc said, you have to look at what is your nonprofit really about? What is the core essentials? And John, if you can move to the next one. Marc, would you agree? Every nonprofit I know was expert at stretching nickels into dimes. Folks, we're going to have to do better now. We're going to have to stretch nickels into quarters. It's not necessarily going to be easy. It's not necessarily going to be fun, but that's the world we're entering. Marc, one of the things I'd like, and this was actually suggested to me by my wife, Andrea, and coming up with, how do you like to lead? Just ask the golden rule question. How do you like to, how should you lead? How do you like being led? Think back in your career. if you're a CEO or an executive director or a board chair, you always weren't at the top of the totem pole. And when you weren't, how did you like to be led? And those are probably practical experiences for you to embrace. And Marc, would you agree? One of the things, I got right, I got wrong. I always believed in an open door policy, and I wanted my staff to come to me and challenge me and not say, Jim, you're brilliant. Of course, they didn't do that too often, but come, hey, did you think about doing it this way? And I encouraged them that I would be disappointed if they didn't come with me. I said, I can't guarantee we'll find the resources or we can embrace, the strategy you're talking about, but I'm here to listen to it and see if we can make it work. So leaders listen. And as we know, the best organizations are ones that tap the wisdom of the whole. I mean, there's a leader in every seat. There's an important role that I'm going to repeat it, every nonprofit, and within that nonprofit, every employee from executive director to the program delivery staff, to the development staff, to the advancement staff. Marc, what staff am I leaving out? There is some wisdom that be contributed by everyone. And the fact that they bring different disciplines, different perspectives is a good thing. And so let's tap the wisdom of the whole. John, let's move to the next slide. And think about this. What sport is this, Marc? This is not crew. It's not crew.
Do I look like a sports guy?
Yes, you do.
I'm so honored that you think I might.
It looks like a name, but anyways, for a boat to come in first in a regatta or a race like that, literally everyone's got to push and pull hard. And I think really this is a metaphor for America right now. Everyone has to contribute. And I'm sorry I'm repeating myself, but we're in a deep hole and we need everybody to contribute. And that includes, we love nonprofit employees, okay? But we love board members because you know what they do, Marc? They work hard, except we just don't pay them. And this time, if you're a board member, we're going to need you to lead by example more than you ever have before. And John, if we can go to the next image. And this starts, you're not going to have credibility in going out to the community and asking for the gifts unless you are giving at a personally significant level. What is personally significant? I can tell you, you can take me, Marc, Pitman, and Warren Buffett, and we'll all have different interpretations of personally significant. But this is a time for a board to lead by example, and that's both giving and their time, talent, and treasure. And the boards that have the most credibility and receive the best treatment from foundations have 100% board participation in annual funds from both the board and staff. Now realize that that might be a different level because everyone's personally significant level and stretch is different, but we need you out there. We can go to the next slide, please. And when I hear that board members are afraid of asking, and that is absolutely true, and guess what? People like Marc and I will tell you a nonprofit can succeed without that, because really 90% of the work happens, the ask is just one moment in that gifting continuum. It's just one moment in time. And if you do a good job of that word cultivation, of informing, engaging, inspiring, Marc Pitman will tell you that actually asking for the gift is one of the easier things to do. But if you don't do a good job of cultivating the donor, I don't care how good your solicitor is. Now, if you have board members who might be reluctant about asking, and most people are, one of the great ways to engage them is just have them thank your donors right now. And I was very impressed in our poll that most of you wanted stewardship programs. This is a fantastic time to keep communicating and engage your board members just to make phone calls, okay? Guess what? Your donors are probably home and will be able to reach them. And also ask them to open doors. Here's the good news, our art used to be measured in the gold standard of face-to-face communication, and now we have to do it virtually, and we are seeing definite progress, okay, and definite concrete results from the virtual discovery, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship of gifts. Marc, I'm hearing, even receiving reports of $1 million leadership gifts being solicited over video conferencing. You know, we were told that it has to be face to face. Well, social distancing does not allow that, but you can get results from virtual fundraising, and board members should be asked to open doors. They don't have to ask for the gift, but they need to break the ice and introduce somebody from their personal or professional network to the nonprofit's executive director, or maybe the director of development, or maybe the development committee chair, someone who then would be comfortable in asking.
Well, and this is where it takes it for us to get out of our own way. We can see all the reasons why somebody might not give, but it's not our decision to make. We need to let the donor make the decision. And we can be saying, hey, look, I don't even know how this economy is done for you or gone for you, but we're to make the impact that we want to make as a group. $1 million gifts is one of the things we're needed. Is that something you could consider?
Wow. Right. And I think, Marc, before you used the word crazy, I said insane. For those organizations that believe they have to step aside, delay, not ask, crazy, insane, folks, you still serve very, very profoundly essential missions. That needs haven't gone away. If anything, your needs have escalated. And so when it comes to your fundraising speed, do not take your foot off the gas pedal. That would be crazy or insane. Another reason to keep in touch, okay? Virtually, you know, everyone's doing virtual video conference calls. I bet a lot of your donors have that. They all have cell phones. Treat them like family. And what are we doing with family every day? We are calling them. We're asking them, how's everything in your area? Are you doing okay? You update them on how you and your loved ones are doing. That's the way you should think of your donors. You should be in touch with your donors more than ever. And Marc, I'd like to say, do nonprofits have superpowers? I say, you betcha. And I use the PPP. No, that's not the pay loan protection, but purpose powers perseverance. That's what nonprofits have had. Nonprofits have had to climb very steep hills and mountains before. And remember, you're driven by the strongest of all ingredients, passion. Don't forget that. You serve a very, very important mission, and you continue to serve that. Marc, I love the late poet Maya Angelou, and I like closing. She said that people will not remember what you said. People will not even remember what you did. People will never forget how you made them feel. And that is either that hard or that easy. Our job in the nonprofit world is to make our donors and our prospects seem like they're the most important person in the world to us. Marc, I'm guilty of repeating a slide, but President Kennedy was a big hero for me, and he gave the commencement address on June 10th, 1963 at American University, and I just love this. He said our most common basic link is that we all inhabit the same small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal. Marc, I get goosebumps. It's like President Kennedy is speaking to us right at this moment, right now. So I want to thank Marc. This has been a terrific hour. The time just flew by. And again, thank you. You are a giant in our field. Thank you for all the good you have done, all the professionals and volunteers you've inspired. to be even more successful in pursuing their very different pursuits of noble causes. It's been a pleasure to partner with you. And guess what? We're going to do it again. And I want to
Thanks
thank
for
our
having me.
producer, John Argent, who's CEO of Game Day Media, who these webinars would not be possible without him. Marc, what time do you have?
5:59. You run a tight ship.
Okay, we're going to roll this. Marc, say to the Pitman family in Greenville and in Maine and elsewhere, stay safe. Thank you. And
too.
I
Andrea.
continue to look forward to collaborating with you. And thank you to our attendees.
Yeah, thank you,
Remember,
everyone.
don't take your foot off the gas pedal. See y'all next Wednesday, 4 o'clock. Thank you.